sunny. Looking back, it was all needed. The problems, the pain, the trauma, the grieving. You are now tuned in to the prisoner to painter. Prisoner to painter. Hard work, dedication. Rainy days, inspiration. Prisoner to painter. And now, a word from your local Pope dealer.
It's pretty loud. Not doing anything. Go live. Perfect. I'm probably leaving some dead space in there, not even on purpose, but yep. There we go. Okay, perfect. So welcome to the Prisoner to Painter podcast. I'm Nathan McDermott, and today joining us is Justin Counts.
How you guys doing today?
Big in the Jackson community, clearly. So a lot of people know your name. Uni, I'm going to say her name because she's a good friend of mine, but she's excited seeing you on. She's like my fifth guest.
Oh,
so,
wow. Yeah. I worked with Uni on the board.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked on a couple of things for the community, actually. So
Awesome, man. Yeah, we just went to a wedding, which is super cool.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's nice. So I'm staying away from this. And I'm also done mansplaining. We're trying to be done mansplaining, but I quit writing notes. But I am going to say this. Justin Counts, at least what it says on his Facebook, and I ran it by him before, so it's accurate. Owner of All for Less, owner of J&J Hand Poured Candles, veterans housing advocate, and he just started a new job at Jackson Strength Network, CEO, and Young People of Purpose, he still does, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then just to kind of put into perspective where you were, a former housing specialist at Community Action Agency, former case manager at the Jackson Housing Commission, former health worker, it says. List goes on. I didn't list them all down. Man, that's fucking impressive. That's fucking impressive. That is, dude. That is.
We just try to do what we can, man.
Right on.
As much, information I learn, I try to give back to the community, and we try to grow and keep evolving.
Right on, man. So here, clearly, we kind of go from childhood because I want to know why people do things. So, I wrote a couple notes, but it says you were born and raised in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Man, so I frequently ask the question about childhood, but what made you want to move to Jackson?
Well, I was raised by my father in Plainfield, New Jersey. I didn't have a relationship with my mom, and actually she ended up moving to Michigan, and she was incarcerated for most of the majority of my young life. Okay. So when I finally came to Michigan, it was to reunite with my mom and get to know her and my brothers and sisters that I had here.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Yeah. I try to ask, and I try not to bring up too much bad stuff, but there's a lot of bad in people's stories.
Yeah, it's all right though. I don't mind talking about these things, because this is what all led me to be here.
Perfect. So what did mom and dad do for work prior to that? Yes.
Yeah, my father was a firefighter. So I was raised by my father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather. So unlike a lot of my friends in that era growing up in the 80s, a lot of us didn't have fathers.
Mm-hmm.
I was the opposite. I didn't have a mother. Where most of my friends didn't have fathers, I grew up without a mom. So I grew up with a lot of tough love, a lot of male masculine energy, especially back in those days, men weren't allowed to cry. Mm-hmm. We were taught that a man that don't work, don't eat, just real solid principles like that. And my mom, unfortunately, she had a rough start in life, had me young, and just, I had to go through a little journey. So for the most part, I didn't really know my mom until after I got out of the military.
Right.
So for the most part, my dad raised me.
Right on. Man, it's I never like assuming anything, but starting this out, all the stuff you do for fathers as well. I went the opposite direction. I thought it was going to be the opposite in your story. So that's why I asked it clearly. Make an ass out of myself.
It's because really I just saw having that structure of having a father, a grandfather, and a great grandfather, and I saw how my friends that didn't have that. Yeah. And I saw how life was for them. Yeah. Growing up, the things that I was able to do you know, some of those things, it was harder for them because they didn't have that structure. They didn't have those things, that type of discipline and that type of accountability, you know, in the home. So I seen the destruction of what that has, with that, what happens to our families because of that, right? And now we're generations of families with, you know, broken homes. You know, you have children that have never met their grandfather, let alone their father. So you see the results of this now, right? You know, not many men today know how to paint, let alone have a skilled trade, you know, of all colors, you know what I mean? So you're seeing this now, like this lack of skill, and a lack of real like masculinity is really gone. So I saw a need, and I'm just trying to help fill the gaps, really.
Awesome. I don't know what the study is, so don't quote me exactly, but kids need a sense of belonging. Like kids need to know where they come from to grow up healthy. So that would just make sense. You need to know your father and your grandparents. You need to know, because you need to know where the hell you come from. I don't know the exact study, but they say that kids, it's important for them to know where they came from. So I mean, it's like a sense of belonging or like a higher purpose. So, you know, if it's not God or whatever it is, it's you know where you came from. So,
and also just some lessons only can be taught from a father. You know, a father knows what it's like to be a young boy, and he knows what it's like to be a young man, and he's had the wisdom to live through a lot of life. And if a father has had a father over top of him, now that's even more years of combined knowledge that you have to be able to pass down. So it's a valuable asset that we tend to overlook a lot of times.
Perfect. Sorry, dude. This is. Thank you for growing with me in this. I appreciate that. It's one of my first ones by myself. So, what's your favorite memory of childhood?
Man, my favorite memory of childhood, I think I really don't know. I did unfortunately go through a lot of trauma, a lot of childhood trauma when I was young. But mostly I remember I wanted to be a football star. I spent a lot of time outside playing, like most kids growing up in the 90s. Every sport, you know. I was the kid that could swim, you know, in the hood. So I swam. You know, I was different. I was always different. I always knew that, you know, 'cause I could do pretty much everything that I tried. You know, I was pretty much good at it. You know, if I tried ice skating for the first time, I was able to do it. You know, it was just one of those things. So it's kind of carried with me through life. But most part, I think the best thing I remember about childhood is even after I ran away at 16, I just graduated on my own. You know, I did a lot of things on my own.
Well, it teaches you young accountability and do the right thing. It sounds like that was instilled in you clearly.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I always go this route. What's your least favorite memory?
Man, least favorite. I got a lot of those from childhood. Yeah, I got a lot of those. I don't know. I grew up with a lot of dysfunction in the home, so a lot of least favorite memories. But I lost a lot of childhood friends. You know, I can speak on that. You know, just having a lot of childhood friends die. I think that my first stabbing was when I was 15. You know, so like being used to violence at a young age, always seeing death. You know what I mean? It really started a lot of the perceptions that I had in life. The early perceptions that I had in life were based upon the environment that I was in, and the environment wasn't good. So my perceptions of life wasn't good, you know, at that time.
Fair enough, man. So I tried to. What was your favorite cereal growing up?
Oh, I loved Fruity Pebbles for sure.
Man,
Still,
right. I got a little cheap, so mine's the Dino Pebbles now.
Dino Pebbles too. Yeah, we know about the green bag for sure.
That's funny. What was your family dynamic like in terms of like brothers, sisters?
I'm the oldest, 9 brothers and sisters. Being that I come from, you know, parents that were never married. My father has 5 children, and my mom has 5 children. Maybe in the common denominator between the both of them. My dad has all daughters. So I have 4 sisters over there, and my mom here. She has I forget how many of us. There's 4 boys and one girl. My sister's the only girl here. So, you know, we had a blended family.
Yeah.
But I'm the oldest.
Okay.
So I've never had a big brother. Don't know what that's like.
Gotcha.
You know, and I didn't grow up in the house with any of my little brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't know what that was like until now.
Gotcha. Well, not on purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I had sisters in the home with me growing up. So I always had little sisters around, but, you know, never a little brother around.
Gotcha. Well, man, so how would you say your childhood was in a whole? I mean, good, bad, and indifferent. Is there anything you would like to share about your childhood before we go, move on?
Yeah, I had a mixed childhood, man. I mean, it was good and bad. I had a lot of good people in my life, but I also had some bad people in my life. You know, growing up without a mother, you really don't understand what that does to a young boy psychologically, especially growing up in those times where you know, you weren't allowed to cry. You know, my father would always say, like, after a boy is 3, you know, you don't really need to be crying like that unless you had a real reason.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a reason to cry, they would give you a moment, and then they would tell you, like, all right, you know, you're not hurt no more, so you need to stop crying.
Yeah.
So growing up, I never saw a man cry. Not my father, not my grandfather, not my great grandfather. And I thought that was like just normal, you know. So a lot of things that I grew up with that were normal to me are not going to be normal to you.
Well, man, you have a manly job though, like a firefighter. I mean, that's a pretty damn manly job, you know. So
Definitely,
I can see how I wasn't raised in the men don't cry type generation, but you know that my grandpa was still like that. But man, that's still I guess. That's a manly job. So clearly, it's probably like you don't cry in that line of work. So it just kind of trickles down.
And then when you add the historical aspects of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming from 3 generations of Black men, right? Yeah. My last name is Counts, right? That's actually German and Dutch. We come from a plantation in South Carolina. It was called the Counts Plantation. Wow. So every Black man in my lineage with this last name, we come from this plantation, right? So my family comes from actually slavery, and we come from off of the slavery to segregation era. And my grandfather lived in those eras. My great grandfather, they went to war. My great grandfather went to war, lost his legs, came home, still got treated the same way, you know. My grandfather, you know, he was born in the 30s, you know, so he lived through segregation and having to put his head down. Things like that. So they were angry, you know, very angry men. You know, we didn't live in neighborhoods that were integrated. Even in the 90s and the 2000s, New Jersey is very much segregated and still is. You know, you don't see interracial relationships in New Jersey like that. If you do, it's usually Hispanic and Black, you know, never white and Black. And it's by design because they're neighborhoods. We don't live close together, and there's no interaction, right? So, you know, having people that raise you like that, right? There's a lot of anger, a lot of resentment sometimes, you know. Imagine fighting for your country and you give your life for your country and you come home and your country is still, you know, doesn't want you here, doesn't, you know, respect you as a man, or doesn't give you the opportunities that anyone else has.
Two things. My grandpa went and served, great grandpa went and served, come back. Two men who did the same thing, treated completely different just because the color of their skin. Second, how the hell did you not grow up hating people? And so some things I ask for the camera, this is one of them that's not. Like, how do you grow up not fucking hating us? Like, really? Because that's, you know.
I mean, I think because I was growing up during that time when things were changing, right? Even though my grandfather was that way and felt that way and had a severe mistrust of white men, he never took a loan because he didn't want to owe anyone money.
Sure.
He never had a food stamp. So these men always taught us the value of working for yourself, building up your own money and educating yourself, right? They believed in taking care of themselves. because they come from a history of having to take care of themselves where there was no help for them. So they didn't believe in trusting those systems. My dad, he grew up later on in life where things were changing, right? We already had schools that were integrated, even though they weren't integrated in New Jersey, but he didn't have any reason to hate anyone. With him being a firefighter, he worked with many white people. So one of his best friends was a white guy.
Gotcha.
So I was always in settings where I was integrated. I went to Catholic school for a little bit when I was young. My stepmother was very educated, Black woman. She worked for the World Trade Center in New York. So yeah, I just never had that. We didn't grow up like that. And being that we didn't live close, I didn't have any close interactions with anyone white until I got to the military.
Gotcha.
Right. My idea of, I would say I was more ignorant to what a white person was or what their status was. I thought that every white person was rich. Because the only white people that I saw were the guys that walk in New York with the business suits and the suitcases and the briefcases that ride the train and they work in those big skyscrapers. They make a lot of money usually and ride BMWs and stuff. So that was my understanding of what white people were and how they lived. They lived in nice neighborhoods with nice grass and places that we weren't traditionally allowed to go.
Gotcha.
Well,
man, if hate's not taught, hate will die off. And I really believe that people are going to die. So the hate will die with them as long as it's not taught. I really believe that. So I wasn't taught to hate. But it's funny that you say that first story. I can remember the first Black guy that Dante Culpepper's cousin of all people moved to Fowlerville. His grandfather was raised. His grandfather was a preacher, and same thing. Fowlerville was all white, and I'm not even that old, so that just shows me that it really wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't. I was fourth grade, and I'm 27. That wasn't that long ago, man. I think people forget that, like, oh, that wasn't years ago. That was in my lifetime. That's not that long ago.
And a lot of these things, I tell people on Facebook, the sad reality of life is, we're two men, we're the same, but at the same time, because of the color, the hue of our skin, the shade of our skin, our realities are two totally different realities. What's true for you is not going to be true for me. So if I express my truth, it's going to sound foreign to you, and you're going to be like, well, that's not how it is for me. Oh, it's this. And you're like, it's hard for you to understand it because you're like, that's not my truth. And that's where we're at as a people, where we can't understand each other because we want to discredit each other's truths. Right.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish here is I never put my opinion because what I have to say is not somebody's story. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. Somebody gets to tell their story, their truth, how it is for them. It has nothing to do with who's on this side of the table. So that really appreciate you coming on. I'm sure, dude. And then always there's three sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. But one side's always more truthful than the other, no matter how you cut it. So it's like, and I think people get too wrapped up on who's right. Somebody doesn't always have to be right. Somebody doesn't always have to be wrong. Like you just said, your truth is your truth.
Yeah, because a feeling is a feeling, right? And just because I feel a certain way, don't mean that it is that way, right? And just because I perceive it that way, it doesn't mean that this is not any less true, right? So I've learned that too over time. I respect everybody's opinions. I respect everybody's, life because we don't get to choose. You know what I mean? Like if I was born, in Nebraska, I'd be a white guy. You know what I'm saying? If I was born in South Africa, I could be Elon Musk's son. You know what I mean? Like, if I was born in California, I could be, Denzel Washington's son and not have to worry about things. But that's one of the things with life is you don't get to choose, right? It's just a crapshoot, right? And some things are what I call factors, right? These factors determine why we are the way that we are, right? I always, when I meet people and I see people, I never ask like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with him? Damn, this guy's crazy. What's wrong with him? Or this lady's crazy. What's wrong with her? Why is she acting like this?
Yeah.
I always think about what happened to them, right?
Yeah.
Because I understand it's not what's wrong with them because they didn't start this way. It's usually factors, things that happen to them in their life along their journey that cause them to be the way that they are when I meet them in the present, right? And it's the same way with anybody, right? There's a lot of factors that happen that caused me to become this equation that we see today. But it took a lot of hitting my head.
Yeah.
Took a lot of getting slammed in the dirt, you know what I mean, before I got to this point. So now that I've realized that about myself as a 40-year-old man, you know, if it took me, you know, being educated, having all the opportunities in the world, if it took me to get dragged through the mud and it took me all these years to get it together, imagine how it's going to be with people that have less support systems, you know, that have less resources.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder for them and sometimes virtually impossible.
It's funny you said that. The name of this is going to be Through the Hard Way at first, because that's the only way I fucking learned anything. It's through the hard way. But man, yeah, I don't want to make anything too political ever because I also keep that out of here. But I think rich people don't see color; they see green, and I think that people are starting to understand that more, and not just in a bad way. Like now that I'm a felon, so I relate to a lot more people than just white people because I go through the same struggle as black, white, Mexican. Like I go through the same damn struggle. So we're finding a common ground, a bad one, but we're finding a common ground nonetheless. So
I actually wrote a poem on Facebook and I called it. I said, and excuse my language. I said, "Poverty is the new N-word."
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I used a story, right, of a black guy who was friends with a white guy. And this white guy lived in the hood. He lived, you know, on let's just say Chiddock. He lived on Chiddock Street. Grew up on Chiddock Street and rocked with him. All his friends are black, you know, so he talks like everybody else around Chiddock Street, dresses like everybody else. You know, one day he asked his black friend, "Hey, can I get a ride to the store?" So his friend says, "Okay," takes him to the store. While he's going into the store, his black friend is sitting in the truck. He sees his friend walking in the store, and there's a group of white guys standing in front of the store, and he hears them talking about his friend. And he hears the word that they calls him. He calls him, "Oh, this guy is white trash." So he's looking at his friend, and he's looking at this group of white guys, and he's confused. He's like, "Well, why are they calling him that?" You know what I mean? So when his friend comes back, he says he doesn't want to hurt his friend's feelings. So he doesn't want to let him know that this group of white men had called him white trash, right? This is how they saw him. But long story short, I used this poem to basically point out that there's a hierarchy in the way that the world works, right? And it's usually a financial system. It's about who has the most money, right? The guy with the most money is usually the boss, you know, and everybody else beneath him are the workers. And it's through this system that we see the real division of the world. It's through money. You know, if you have a lot of money, then your life is going to be a lot different than someone who doesn't have money. And what we're seeing today is that a lot of white faces like yours, right? They've never experienced this treatment. And now all of a sudden they're experiencing this poverty, right? And they're like, "Well, what's going on here? This is not what life is supposed to be. This is not the white picket fence they told me." You know, so something's wrong. And that's why a lot of people, you know, were upset, you know, with this election cycle and why people voted the way they did, because we were ready for, you know, to see something different. But, you know, all of that stuff is distractions to keep us, you know, so I understand.
Well, and the whole thing here is always to relate, never compare, man. And another huge reason why we started this, man, I had the white picket fence growing up, and then I had my mom and dad sharing a car, taking me to school in the same car, dropping my dad off at Livonia at Ford in the same car, no heat, sleeping with it in the back. So I've seen both growing up. Like I got both realities of what it could be and also what it could be. And one's good, one's pretty fucking bad. honestly, you know.
Me too.
Yeah.
You know, growing up with parents that were educated, you know, I was able to see what it was like for us. Life for us was good. You know, we never had food stamps, and we lived in a black suburb. You know, I went to my first school was a black private school,
Okay.
and I did that up until 5th grade.
Okay.
And then after that, I went to a Catholic school across town.
Okay.
So I got to see where the white folks went to school and where they sent their children, and I saw the difference. And then I also saw, you know, my cousins and things. I have family members that still live in the hood, you know. So I grew up with getting dropped off to grandma's house, and grandma's house is smack dab in the middle of the hood. Like, so, you know, it was like gladiator school when you get dropped off to grandma's house. You know, they're gonna see what the suburb kids is about, you know. So that was the type of stuff I grew up, you know, always.
Well, hey, perfect. You led me right into my next question of how was school. So there's a couple questions I always ask everybody, but I'm interested because I was born and raised Catholic. Fucking judgy they are, regardless of the color of your skin. They're just fucking judgy.
Yeah.
So how was it going there in 5th grade?
In pipeline at an early age. And it's usually because of astigmatism from teachers.
Yeah.
Because they just don't understand the children. They don't know how to connect with them. So a lot of times it's easier to just write them off as, oh, this kid's bad, you know, and it was easy for them to write me off as bad because they had my sister in comparison, who was 2 years younger than me, and she was a straight 4.0 student. But they didn't understand that she didn't have the same type of trauma that I had, you know. And then I was a kid that was crying out for help, essentially, and there was no one to help me, you know. So I lasted half a year, man. I got kicked out for doing the same thing my white friend had just showed me. I'll never forget. He had opened up a stapler. You know, we open up a stapler and you shoot it. Yeah. So I did. I shot it at the ground, and the head nun, she saw it, and she was like, "Oh no, he's shooting guns." And they called my dad. My dad came in the firefighter truck, and they expelled me from their school. And that's what started my downhill spiral. I had to go to 6th grade at a regular public school. And that's where I started everything. Smoking cigarettes, you know, stealing cars that year, you know, everything.
Well, and I didn't want to make this about race, but it seems like this is some of your stories. So I need to say this. I remember when I was going in front of Judge Grant. Well, Beebe, I went in front of Beebe. Judge Grant was filling in. Yes, I don't know his background. He doesn't know my background. But we had the same exact charges, same exact everything. But what I could see, the same exact thing. He got 5 years in prison. I got probation. And now, yes, backgrounds might have been different, maybe different charges, whatever. But ultimately, I see what you mean. Somebody did something, you did the same thing, you got in worse trouble. That's when I realized that it was. I've seen it on movies, and you know, I see the way people talk, and it's not. I don't agree, but I think that like right in Jackson County, right in front of the judge. This shit's real.
It is. If you look, it happens everywhere. In our hospitals, go look at Henry Ford's statistics. Just search, type in your Google, healthcare disparities in Jackson County, and you'll see that the average life expectancy of a person that lives in the 49203 area code is going to be 20 years less than a person that lives in the Northwest District. And why is that? We start to find out. Maybe it's race, we don't know. Maybe it's finance, we don't know. We don't have enough information to make a good hypothesis. So all we can do is guess and speculate, right? But as a Black person, I can tell you it feels racist sometimes when you look and you see the stats. There are more Black babies that die per baby that's born when you look at stat per stat. You know, why are more Black babies dying than white babies, right? Why are more Black mothers dying than white mothers, right? Why are Black men dying 20 years earlier than their counterparts? And what we're seeing is a lot of different factors, but some of it is psychological, right? Us as people, right? We can only sometimes identify with what we know, right? And for a woman, let's say a woman working as a doctor or a nurse, right? And she sees a baby. She sees a white baby with blue eyes. It looks like It looks like her nephew. It looks like her grandson. It looks like her brother. It looks like, so it's easier for her to make that attachment. Like, this is a good life. I got to save this life. So she might work a little bit harder. We don't know what the true psychological thing is. But I even heard an interview with a man who was racist, and they asked him, if there were two people burning in the same fire, who would you save first? And he says, well, of course, I would save this life first, because this is the one that I have to show the most loyal to. And I understand that as a person, because we have a person, what do you call it? We have the survival instinct, right? As a people, we want to see our people survive, right? So of course I'm going to go save my family first, right? If my family is burning in a house and your family is burning at the same time, even though I don't have no hatred against you, I'm going to go save my family first. You're going to go save your family first, right? Of course. That's just the way we are as people. And I think some of that maybe translates to that, but honestly, I believe a lot of it is finance.
That's still crazy to me though, because I physically cannot feel that. I it's not pat myself on the back. This is how everybody should be. I've never seen. I say I don't see color. That's a little black and white thinking, but I don't. Everybody's fucking equal to me. And that's not just because of God and all that. That's not it.
I like to challenge that statement, because I like people, because we want you to see color, right? Because think about it. Like, one of the things that I like about New York and I miss about being back home, New York and New Jersey, was the diversity, that there were so many cultures there, right? I can go eat at an Italian restaurant, and I'm talking about real deal Italian guy. His family is from Sicily. They in there tossing pizzas up in the air. He's fat, sweaty. I don't even care, because I just know what it's gonna be when I go in there. I'm not going to a Mexican restaurant to have a white guy cook my food. You know what I mean? I'm going for this to experience this culture. So we want to see culture. You know what I'm saying? But we just have to get to the point where we understand that culture is not race, right? There's no such thing as, what people didn't like against, I know we get too political, but what a lot of people don't like about the DEI thing is because the attack on the idea of whiteness. And people get so offended, like when they hear the term whiteness as an attack on a white American male. And that's not true, because we have to look at what is white, right? It really is not a thing. When you look at the first time that the word race was used, it was one white European trying to differentiate himself against another white person. And it was the Romans when they encountered the barbarians. They had to create a whole nother word so that people would know, like, hey, these dudes are different from us.
They ain't up.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we're class up here. We got the gold armor and stuff. These dudes over here, they're like dogs. So we got to make sure people know that we're different. Right? And with American culture, right? Everyone from every culture, every background was able to come here and adopt white. But the black man, the brown man, everybody else had to be different, separate. They had to stay whatever you were, Us black people, we just had to create a term, because we don't even know nothing of where we come from or our history or anything like that. So we didn't get a chance to become white, but everybody else did. If you're Irish,
Polish.
If you're Polish, if you're Dutch, anything, if you're Russian, you were able to come and assimilate. And that's where we're at still, where we're experiencing the difference of realities, right? I once said to a guy, the difference between a black man coming home from prison and the difference between a white man coming home from prison for the same crimes, you will find that the white man will get a job a lot faster. And it's because a white man is a felon, when he tells a job that he's a felon, it's usually like a generalization that, oh, he did something what we call white collar crime. Means it's not as bad. It's not as bad.
Yeah.
Right? So he's able to get better jobs.
Yeah.
Right. I remember coming home from prison, and I remember you said outside, like, man, I wouldn't work for $12 an hour.
Yeah.
I literally had to come home from prison and work for $10 and $12 an hour, plus have child support take 55% of my check while I'm doing it. And I had to, even though that I was a licensed aircraft technician in the Air Force, had this type of skills.
Yeah.
We didn't go over that. Always was smart,
Mhm.
always had education, never had a record before. But even though I had all these skills, I wouldn't get the jobs.
Mhm.
I wouldn't get the looks. I'd show up to places and they'd say, "You're Justin Counts?" This was before we had Facebook.
Yeah.
It was just a name on the application, and I know how to talk when we get on the phone. You would never know who you're talking to. So I'd show up to these places and wouldn't get these jobs. But meanwhile, I had a white friend here who was a heroin addict. His father was a heroin addict. Neither one of these men had a high school education. Neither one. But yet, they worked in construction, operated backhoe machines. These guys went to work for $30, $40, $50 an hour. And they had active addiction. They would lose jobs. They would, mess up a job, and 2 days later they're back on another company making $30, $40 an hour. And they would always be like, well, we're gonna try to get you on, and they would try. The only position that I would be offered is flag guy. Yeah. So you start to see like, well, there's something to this. Like, well, there's something to this.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, like I said, like it's about self-preservation.
Yeah.
So is the safe system still that way? In some ways, right? It hasn't changed. You look on any construction crew anywhere. And that's what I try to tell people. It's not because we don't have the skill set. It's not because we don't have the knowledge or the want to, right? It's because some people are still holding on to these old ideas and they don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
But like you said, eventually it's going to die.
It has to.
But we just need people to understand that there are a lot of brothers and sisters that are still going through these things, and not to always just like discredit what they're feeling or what they're going through, because sometimes it's still very real. Like, even though we don't want it to be, I had a lady jump out the pool at the Y because me and my white wife came in there and got in, and whereas I wasn't even offended. Like, I'm used to it, I know this woman is in her 60s, 70s, so you got to understand, back when she was growing up, she wasn't even allowed to be in the pool with me.
Yeah.
So I have that knowledge and that understanding, and maybe I shouldn't give her a pass, but I just understand that this is the way she was raised.
Mhm.
So, I can't be too mad at her. If she was younger, then maybe, I would be really upset.
Yeah, no shit.
But at the end of the day, my wife was more upset than me,
Mhm.
It's because we're used to it.
Yeah, that's fucked up that people have to say that. We're used to it. Where it's just, that's fucked. I'll try to go back to your story, but this has been great.
Yeah,
It's been great, man. So it says you graduated in 2002, and then the first job I see is 2019. So clearly there's a lot of gap there. But but before we get to the end of school, you said you graduated after you moved out at 16.
Yeah.
Did you do prom, dances, normal stuff, or no?
No. I worked all the way through high school.
Okay.
I worked all the way through high school. I ran away at 16. I graduated high school at 17. I was in the military. Had a son on the way by 18.
Okay, this is where I stop everybody. I have nothing but respect for anybody who served.
Yeah.
More, I've said it in front of, I'll say it in front of everybody. I respect those who have served more than anybody who have ever had on. So I respect, thank you for your service, seriously.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's a sacrifice for sure.
Man, how was I don't know why I asked this to everybody, but how did they recruit you? Did you go into the recruiter's office, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, I went in the recruiter's office, but like I said, I was third generation military. So my grandfather was in the Air Force. My great grandfather was in the Army.
Okay.
My older cousin was in the Air Force. So it was like, this is a thing that we did in our family, in our tradition. A lot of Black people did, especially on the East Coast. Traditionally, that was a lot of our escape because whereas other places weren't give you the opportunity to operate a forklift, the military would say, "Hey, come fly this plane or come fix this plane." You know, they didn't care.
Gotcha.
So that was a way for us to get on,
Understood.
for our families.
Well, you chose one of the hardest fucking branches, from what I understand hearing. So you didn't just go for Army infantry, you went for the fucking Air Force.
They said the Air Force is the easiest, actually.
No shit. Okay.
I mean, the Air Force, it required you to be smarter to get in because the test is harder.
Gotcha. Okay.
So to get in the Air Force, it's like everything is based on like an 80%. So whereas in the Marines and the Army, you might only need like a 40 to get in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like honestly.
Okay.
And the Air Force is a much higher standard.
I see.
And due to it being a higher standard, they're much tougher on you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was also more lax because the Air Force is unique out of any other branch because they don't send their children to war to fight. Only the leaders go to fight. Only officers are allowed to fly planes in wars. So they don't send their kids to die in the Air Force. They use you for your brain. You're there for your intellectual ability.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah. It's a lot of people just don't know that because they haven't been. So
No, that's cool, man. So so you joined the. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You joined the military to escape.
yeah, pretty much. I witnessed 9/11. You know, my stepmother worked in that building,
Damn.
but she didn't die or nothing. She got lucky. You know, she didn't go to work that day. We didn't have the greatest relationship, so like, you know. But she didn't go to work that day. But I remember when it happened, the first plane hit. I went onto the roof of my high school, and what you could see from the roof of our high school, you could pretty much see the outline and the skyscrapers of New York City. So you could see the building on fire, you could see the smoke and all of that stuff. You could smell it. And I remember sitting there, rolled a joint, and I'm just watching because we thought it was kind of funny at first. We thought that initially we thought that maybe some pilot just got high, made a mistake, you know. So as a young, immature kid, you know, I'm just watching this like, oh, somebody's fired, you know, like, oh, you're done.
Yeah.
You know, and then watching that second plane hit and realizing like, oh, this ain't no joke.
Yeah.
You know, and another reason, having a father that was a firefighter. People don't know this. New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia are very close to each other. So they had to have all firefighters from New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, all over Pennsylvania, to go help in those rescue efforts. So my father spent 2 weeks after 9/11 in New York, like no communication because the cell phone towers are down. You know, you could probably talk to him like once every few days. And then I witnessed the trauma of PTSD for the first time through him. You know, watching a black man, strong black man that don't know nothing about mental health, come home PTSD'd out and don't know it, you know, don't realize it, don't know nothing about, you know, we didn't know nothing about that science in the early 2000s, you know, so I watched them suffer through that silently, you know, it just made me want to fight even more, you know.
Dude, small world, never trying to interrupt. My aunt was sitting on the beach, sitting there watching 9/11 happen. She was married to my, it's funny because she also told me back in the day, my uncle was from, he's gonna kill me, I don't know, but he is very dark complexion, not Lebanon. Fuck, he's gonna kill me. I don't know, but him and my aunt, so they were interracial or whatever, so they did not go good for them. But they sat there and watched 9/11 happen from the harbor or bay, wherever the beach is. So it's just a small world to know. You're sitting in the same place, same time, 20 years ago. It's
watching that, you know. And they had to see the destruction, the aftermath of that.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was easy to join after that one.
Fair enough. Well, I don't want to go into the bad, but that is part of it. So you joined the military, and then it's we talked a little bit before. So what happened to get you discharged and then to prison?
I did 2 years in the military, man. I just, man, everything that, like I said, it's always factors. I try to explain it in the best way so it doesn't sound like an excuse.
Yeah.
Being that I came from a broken family, my grandfather probably was like the closest thing to like a real father for me. My real dad, even though he raised me, he was just the type of dad that, you know, he took care of you financially, raised the roof, but he didn't throw a football at you. You didn't have the sex talk, you know. He didn't come to your games and stuff like that because he was working. He worked 2 jobs, you know. He was a man, you know, fixing the car. And when he got home, he was, you know.
Mowing the lawn, doing more than taking care of shit.
Yeah, so he didn't have that time to interact and do things and teach you lessons. So for me, that was my grandfather, you know, and not having a mother and not having a whole side of family that comes along with a mother. I didn't have a lot of people around. So when I got to the military, it was just pretty much I was left on my own devices. My grandfather died very early in the game. Right after I got out of basic training, I had my first son while I was in the military. My recruiter, you know, you asked about the recruiting process. My recruiter was a straight liar. Like most of them are.
I've heard that.
They're all about the numbers. And he never really believed in me because he was kind of like prejudiced. You know, being the fact that he would pick me up from the projects. Like I said, I was living on my own. So I was in the hood, you know. He'd come get me. I'm smoked out. He's like, man, you got to quit this weed stuff. Like, you ain't never going to pass the test. I took the ASVAB test. I was high. You know, he didn't think I would pass it, and I got a 94 on it. You know, he's like, you know, so he never really believed in me. He lied to me. I told him that I had a son on the way. So my experience with the Air Force was I had an older cousin who I grew up with in New Jersey in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Dover, Delaware. So he was able to come home every weekend when he wanted to, you know, he's bouncing around. So I'm like, cool, I can do like him, you know, station me somewhere close. And they were like, yeah, he promised me. I said, man, I got a son. He's going to be here probably sometime in August. You know, I just want to go through basic training and then get back home so I can, you know, get back and get this relationship, you know. They lied, man. They sent me all the way to Seattle, Washington.
Dang.
So I was a kid from New Jersey, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid from New Jersey, never been nowhere. All of a sudden, you sent all the way across the United States. Didn't have the type of family most people have, so I was left to my own devices. You know, there was no calling and checking up on Justin to see how you doing. Like, there's no birthday call, no Merry Christmas. And mind you, my mom's in prison, so, you know, I was just me. You know, me and the sign-on bonus that 22-year-old, 20-year-old kid, 19. Running around all this money, and you're all over the United States. They're sending you everywhere, you know. And military, you don't have nothing. Every night is a party. So, you know, you get these habits, drinking, smoking, and that's all you have. You know, it becomes a toxic cycle. That's how that starts.
Man. So what happened with the you don't gotta say the charge, but so you got discharged and then you went into prison. So was it something with the military? Okay.
Yeah, I got caught with possessions I shouldn't have had.
Understood.
I was always a hustler, you know. When I realized that the military checks wasn't really nothing, like they don't pay you nothing. You know, you get your money and the benefits. And then depending on what job you have, your MOS, there could be extra money. Like for me, I would get hazard duty pay, things like that. But very early in the game, I had the child support system just vicious. You know, I had never signed my son's birth certificate, never had a paternity test established. I didn't even know that I was on child support until he was about 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't even know. They just took my taxes out of the blue one time. I've been sending money home the whole time, everything. But they let a case be set up on me by my son's grandmother, who at the time didn't even have custody of my son. My grandmother had custody of my son. And for years, my son's mother didn't even know that her mom put me on child support.
Damn.
So for years, me and my son's mother, fought because we both thought each other were lying. So I fought this system for years, and it was always oppressing me, always taking my money, always, doing things. So I always had to find ways to subsidize that money.
Fuck.
Yeah, in the military, all you have is you get 3 hot meals, you get a dorm room, and then you get your base pay, which at that time was probably about, it's funny, it's about $1,200 a month.
Damn.
Yeah, about $1,200 a month. Yeah, that's basically about what it is. And then if you have any sign-on bonus, sometimes they will split that up and give you an extra bit of that, or you can do some hazard duty pay, things like that. That would increase the pay.
But that ain't nothing.
But that's nothing.
That's nothing, dude.
And then when you add on top of that, I had a high skill job. So I didn't go to work like the average soldier did. My experience was I wore a uniform. But I didn't wear a gun or anything like that. I worked in a flight, airfield flight line in a hangar. I worked third shift most of the time. And a lot of times I worked on the base with civilians. So because you're working on planes that are made by Boeing, Lockheed Martin, these guys have civilian contractors that work inside of the bases with us. So you're working hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder with a guy that's making $100,000 a year, and you're making pennies.
Damn.
He doesn't have to work any holidays. You work every holiday. You're the new guy on the totem pole, so you're gonna do all the grunt work, and they're making the big dollars. You're making the pennies. So you start to see that, and you're like, damn, this ain't fair. And then your homeboys that work in the chow hall flipping burgers, they making the same check you making.
That's a motherfucker.
You're like, damn. They told you, bro, you should have came over here and did the hotel management. You tripping. You did all that other stuff. And you're like, damn, this ain't fair. So there's no way. And the only way for you to increase your income is to increase your rank, which takes time. So for me as a young kid, man, as a hustler, I wasn't interested in that.
Gotcha.
I wanted to see where the faster money was. And I got into finding things because I had access to planes. So I had access to equipment and everything when they come back from overseas. And, we had a lot of things that we weren't supposed to have.
Understood, man. What's his name? Frank Lucas.
Yeah, I had nothing like that. But I had all the equipment. Vests. I had vests, M16, with the M2A grenade launchers on them, stuff that a guy in the Air Force ain't supposed to have.
Damn.
And we were like selling a little bit of stuff, but it was to other guys in the Army. They're gonna come ask you, the only black guy around. So you're like, oh shit, this is what people do. Okay.
Damn. So I sorry, I lose my words sometimes. You said outside, that you didn't stay there that long. How long did you get sentenced, and how long did you serve? If you can say.
Yeah, no, I had a great deal because I had a great service record, and I was smart. I worked out a deal for 8 months. No dishonorable discharge. So I had a basic standard general discharge. And I worked out my deal where I only had to serve 5 months in a base in Minot, North Dakota.
So that was my next question. That prison is different than normal prison?
Yes. Military prison is cake.
Okay.
It was like the easiest thing. It's like the best thing in the world. Because it's not even like civilian. Like, you don't leave with a felony record. Like that, it's not on your record.
Gotcha.
So it's not like something that stops you from getting a job. They don't ruin your life
Mhm.
because you made a mistake,
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to recover from, you know. And it was a lot easier to do because you got 2 free phone calls every week,
Okay.
1 hour long.
Oh, damn.
You ate 3 square meals from the regular kitchen,
Okay.
in the Air Force, so you were able to choose what you wanted to eat pretty much. So I woke up to omelets and French toast.
Can't believe they did that.
Yeah, for 5 months.
Did they have you locked down though, like jail or?
Yeah. You're
Okay,
locked down.
okay,
You're
okay.
locked down like jail, but no, like you're not shackled nowhere, nothing like that. But you're locked down.
I just always heard that it was easy. Not always heard. I say it like I know a bunch of people, but like
Yeah.
movies and then a couple guys I know, it's like it's cushy. Like
Yeah.
the way I heard it explained.
It would be in comparison to like state to fed prison.
Okay.
Fed prison a lot easier. You get more benefits because it's federal.
Yeah.
So they treat you better. In the military, you're still the difference is you go to prison and you still wear the same uniform, but now they've shamed you because they strip your rank off,
Okay.
all of your patches, everything that you earned, it gets taken away from you now. And you have to wear the same uniform, basically like basic training all over again.
Just like the boardwalk almost, like shaming.
Yeah, they don't deserve it. Yeah, and let me tell you that the worst part is when you get transported in a military prison, they don't put you in a military plane. They put you in a regular Delta civilian plane.
No shit.
With your dress uniform on, with all of the ribbons and all of your stuff stripped off you, and then they shackle you to the plane in front of everybody. And you sit next to regular people, shackled to the plane.
And they just walk you right through, like, look at this loser.
Yeah.
Like, man,
Yeah.
that's fucked up. I mean,
It is.
Yeah.
But my only memory from that, and you ask why I don't hate people.
Yeah.
I'll never forget being shackled to that plane, feeling like shit, all the honor ripped away that you had earned, everything that you had built just taken from you.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget just crying, sitting there shackled, because everybody's looking at you like, what did they do?
Yeah.
Like, this fucking traitor,
Yeah.
like, draft dodger, they're looking at you like you did the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, it was a white lady, old white lady. She went and she looked at me and she said, "It's gonna be all right, baby."
Oh shit.
Straight up, just like that. Like, it's gonna be all right. Like, whatever you did, like, it's gonna be all right. And she didn't have to talk to me. She didn't have to say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
She could have gave me the same looks that everybody else did with judgmental eyes, But she saw something and she was like, "It's gonna be all right." And she was right. It was all right. I did that 5 months. I got out of that. I learned that lesson, and I moved here.
Perfect. So that kind of gets it. So 2 years in the service, then 5 months, let's say. So that's about 22, 23.
Yeah.
Right. So sorry, I'm just trying to get. You got married in 2016. So I guess what happened from when you got out of prison till you got married?
Mm-hmm. Well, I got here 2010, the end of 2010.
Okay.
So I might have been 21 already, 21, somewhere around there, 22. Coming to Jackson was a big culture shock for me.
Yeah, big city it is. I'm a small city.
Yeah, it was definitely a big culture shock. I never seen anywhere so integrated like this anywhere. But so that was different for me. But I liked it because it was so peaceful here. But for me, I was just learning, meeting my mother.
Okay.
As a full-grown man, you're just meeting a mom, and she's got a young family that she's just started. And, she married a pastor here, and a young preacher, and she started having her family. And here I'm this guy, never was raised by her, and all of a sudden, you got to be subjected to rules, right? Where I was used to living on my own, where I didn't have no rules.
Yeah.
There was nobody to tell me to wash dishes or take out the trash, or you can't go here, or you can't do this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, now you're trying to tell me what to do. So that didn't work out when I first got here. I didn't have friends, family like that. Didn't know any of my family here. Say that. So I didn't have nobody. And I lived on the south side with no car. So that job thing,
Yeah.
you know, I'll never forget. I subjected myself to going to the Commonwealth building and working for the call center. I was going in that place wearing 3-piece suits, man. This is before I had a criminal record. So, you know, I was able to work for the gas company. I knew how to type. I know how to talk on the phone. So, you know, they gave me opportunity. But it's only $12 an hour, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, you fix planes, dude.
Yeah.
Like, what's this Elro company? Let me go see what they talking about. They do plane parts or something. They do something. I know what they do over there. They got to give me a job, you know. When I would apply and they'd be like, man, no. Never get no call back.
Damn.
So all of the jobs here that were worth anything, they wouldn't hire me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, damn, I'm trying, like you said, filling out these applications. Mm-hmm. Nobody's giving me a job. Then the people that would give me a job was like Mackey, Tack, and they were more $12 an hour.
Yeah.
And then they would work you for 6 months, and then right when you're about to get hired in, and then all of a sudden you get let go. And you're like, damn.
And working 7 days a week,
Yeah.
10-hour day, yeah, crazy.
And on top of that, like I said, you're still dealing with these systems like child support, taking 55% of your income.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're trying to survive, and there's just no opportunities. So what's left for a guy here? You know, I quickly started having to subject myself to doing other things. My very first month here in Jackson, let's start there. I was coming home from the Rocket. I think Twister was here or something. That's one of the rappers. I met a guy in the Rocket that I've seen a couple times at Blair Park. And he says, hey, man, George, can you give me a ride home to the Blairs? Mm-hmm. I'm like, nah, dude, I'm going back to the South Side. I ain't going that way.
I was like,
Yeah, no, you all right?
I have not yet figured out how to not let my TikTok do that.
Oh, it's the TikTok live?
Yeah, I just do it on there.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly that's just Facebook, YouTube, whatever,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to stream the TikTok.
That's all right.
But yeah, continue.
But yeah, so I didn't have a record here. But my first month here, this guy begged me to take him home. He's like, man, I'll smoke with you, man. Just, you know, take me home. Mm-hmm. I'm like, cool, I'll take you home. So I take him home, drop him off to the Blairs. We smoked at his house. About halfway into the blunt, somebody comes and they're like, man, the police about to come raid in here again. So I'm like, again? What? Why you didn't tell me? I'm getting out of here. So I leave. You know, I get by Frosty's, turn out. All of a sudden, the police is on me, flicking me. I'm like, did I do something wrong, sir? He goes, you left the known drug house. So I had only been here a month. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even sure if I was going to stay here at this time. Mm-hmm. I flashed him quickly my military ID that I still had, that was still active. Because I was still active. I was still getting a lot of benefits, TRICARE, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I showed him my military ID, and this is an Air Force ID, top of the notch. This guy didn't give no F's. He's like, get out of the car. You left the drug house. I said, sir, I just got here. I don't know what's a drug house. I don't know. I don't even know how to get home, honestly. I just know this street takes me straight back to the South Side. Yeah. You know, nope, step out of the car. So he pulls me out of the car, searches my car, turns off my car. I'll never forget because I was driving my stepfather's Buick Century. You know, the old school Buick Century, you got the glove box with the lock on it in the front. Yep. That's where I put my weed at. That cop turned the car off, unlocked the glove box, found my weed. Oh, shit. I had less than an ounce of weed, right? But it was less than an ounce of weed. They charged me with possession with intent to distribute, which is a high court misdemeanor, low court felony. Yeah. Right? So they pleaded that down, and that's how I ended up staying here. Okay. On probation, year of probation. No shit. And that's why you stayed. Yeah. Fuck, I thought you were going to say you went to prison over that shit. I was about to be like, what the fuck? No, dude? I went from no record to record. Because of half ounce a week. And then that started my downhill. Now, you know, really couldn't get no job now. You know, everything was just downhill after that. Yeah. You know, that was my introduction into the criminal justice system. Yeah. you know, and after you go a couple times of this, and then child support, the first thing they do is suspend your license. So then I started driving on suspended charges. You know, now you're going to jail for a year or 6 months here, it is here. You know, it was just downhill after that, everything.
Yeah, I said that to them. They didn't like it very much. I said, what the fuck you want to do? Not drive?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to keep giving them to me, and I'm going to keep paying them. I don't know what to tell you. You know,
I gotta make money somehow.
I got to drive. And look, what do you expect? My mom or my dad or now my wife, but it's like, they're just going to drive. Everything they're doing every day and drive. Like, you guys are insane.
Yeah.
It don't work like that.
Yeah, I didn't get in trouble till to go to prison till 2012.
Okay.
I went through a lot of just back and forth jail, in out of jail, in out of jail. You know, just not having no resources. You know, going through the motions, a young kid,
Gotcha.
young man. So got to prison 2012 for, you know, utterance and publishing, check frauds, and we're like the first retail fraud ring. Like that didn't exist until like we were doing it.
I asked everybody how the hell is quarantine. Clearly not good, but what was?
Yeah. That's actually where I start my book. I'm writing my autobiography now.
Okay.
And I actually started in quarantine because, you know, sitting in quarantine was like, it was a crazy experience for me because I knew that I should have never been there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being as smart as I am,
Yeah.
having the background that I had, you know, you don't go from fixing C-117, you know, $2 billion aircraft to sitting in prison. You know, that's usually not the pathway that happens. So sitting there is like, it was like a rude awakening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, damn, this shit is for real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like the movies. It was like everything that you could think of. Terrifying, being on the fourth tier, you know, and having that fear of somebody pushing you over, you know. Understanding that people next door to you, like some of them are rapists, some of them are murderers, some of them killers, some of them terrible people, you know.
Yeah.
You know? And then some people not bad, cool, you know.
Yeah.
But you just didn't know. You don't know. So it's like all of the scary things that you hear about. You get all of those feelings and all those emotions, and then there's this terrible isolation at the same time. And the most dirtiest, nastiest, filthiest shit you ever seen, too. So you just learn to ride with it, man.
How long did you get sentenced?
Well, this is the thing. So I went to prison for a retail fraud. $1,000 from Walmart.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to talk about racism?
Yeah, the system out against you.
Right.
Yeah.
I caught my case in Coldwater.
Okay.
So I was sentenced out of Coldwater, Branch County.
Okay.
The judge, my sentencing guidelines said 7 to 14 months.
So you could have got away with county.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, I should have.
Unless they went to high. But yeah.
Because I kept fighting it because they kept recommending me 2 years in prison and even though my sentencing guidelines said 14 months, they were like, oh, it's over a year, so that's automatic prison. That was the rule in Michigan. Anything over a year is automatic prison.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, well, it's not over a year because at this time, I already had 7 months served.
Oh shit.
Because I never bonded out.
Yeah.
So I should have been only looking at 7 more months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But no, they sent me to prison for, they said 14 months to 5 years with the tail.
Way over your fucking guy.
14 months to 5 years. Well, they could because the 14 months was still the low end of the higher end of the guidelines, but it was still within the guidelines.
Understood.
So even though I had 7 months served, technically I should have went to prison and seen the parole board and been let out.
Yeah.
But what happened was, as soon as I got to prison, I had a letter from the parole board, you know, the pre-parole board paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I filled that out and I went to the parole board and they denied me. You know, they said not enough time to learn anything. So I was denied and had to do another year. So I ended up doing 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years.
for something I would have got probation, for something I did get probation.
Yeah, and many other white guys that did the same thing, or even worse.
Yeah.
I watched in the courtroom before me get sent home, and they didn't go to jail or they didn't go to prison.
I never said my charges,
Yeah.
but I had first degree home invasion,
Yeah.
third degree home invasion, 6 counts receiving, concealing stolen merchandise, 3 DUI.
But then you want to see something funny? I just told you guys, and I really don't tell a lot of people this, but I went to prison on the retail fraud, and the other, that's what I went to prison on for, Calhoun County. You can search my name.
Mhm.
It's gonna take you a while because I flooded the Google with good stuff. It's gonna take you a while. You got to get to the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
But if you search the Google enough for my name, you're gonna find the article of them sentencing me to prison. And then when you read that article and you see my picture on the front page of Cold Water's News, and they wrote the article like I was Scarface.
Why?
I promise you. When you read it, you're gonna be like, "What? What are they talking about?" Like literally, they wrote the article. We're tired of these guys from Detroit coming down to our community, and I'm like, I'm not even from Detroit. I'm like, what? You know, and you know, it was crazy, yeah. And the Calhoun jail, man, there were other inmates in there calling me the N-word. Like, yeah, Mr. N-word in here. You know, that's how much they didn't see too many black people. So I think like if I was here in Jackson, I don't think I would have went to prison.
No, probably
Yeah,
not.
probably
No. I mean, I've seen a lot of shit get, shrugged off. I mean,
Yeah.
here in Jackson County, they just push it out.
Yeah,
Probation, fuck up probation 3 times,
yeah,
then you might go to prison. Maybe.
Yeah,
That's a big maybe. Yeah, you might be able to get out of it, man.
exactly. I'm like, I went to prison from stealing from Walmart. It just happened to be over $1,000 worth of stuff.
Man, well, I don't know what to say to that. Really. No. So 2.5 years. Well, that's 2012. So what? You meet your wife kind of when you get out?
Yeah,
Close to it.
yeah. I'm actually, I first met my wife inside.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
being that I was smart, educated,
Mhm.
and non-violent,
Mhm.
I was immediately offered a gate pass job working outside the prison. Immediately. So I worked across the street at the Dwayne Waters Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, they had the Aramark contract workers. And my wife worked as a dietary, the head dietary chef for the hospital kitchen.
Cool.
So she ran a crew of inmates as well as other staff, right? And they ran a small kitchen inside of the hospital, and it was the inmates' job to serve the food to the other inmates that were in the hospital.
Gotcha.
I first started working in the hospital as a cleaning crew, you know, cleaning the hospital rooms of the inmates that were living in the hospital.
Okay.
And that's what started me changing my life for seeing that shit.
Yeah.
So we're totally just a straight professional relationship.
Mhm.
And when I got home from prison, I remembered her and I just looked her up on Facebook. And like, you know, originally just intended to call for some coffee and just talk, you know,
Mhm.
be friends. You know, I just wanted a friend.
Yeah.
And it just turned into what it turned into. We were married for 10 years, almost 10 years now.
Dude.
Crazy.
Heck yeah. When's your anniversary?
It's March the 5th,
First.
which is a year.
Okay.
I chose this date for a reason. So I got out March the 5th, 2015.
Okay.
That's when I got out of prison.
Okay.
I got married to her after I got paroled. So it was a year later, March the 5th, 2016.
Okay.
Because I said this will be a double anniversary for me and I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny you say that. Me and my wife got married. She's watching this. She's gonna kill me. Well, we got married the 2nd or the 3rd. I don't remember, but it goes July 2nd, her birthday or anniversary, then her birthday, and then the 4th of July. So I tell her I'll never forget. I still forget which one goes. I fucking don't remember the 2nd or the 3rd. Man.
Yeah, I'll forget the year, but I'll never forget the day.
That's
So
it.
it's like,
Yeah, man. Well, so, okay. You meet her, you get married 2016. What happens between when you get married and when you finally, I say finally, but when you started at You're gonna kill me for
Yeah. No, well, Reed Manor. Yeah, Reed Manor was my first job in the community like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I got lucky, man. I have a mentor. His name is Hakeem Crampton.
Okay.
And Hakeem, you know, he did a lot of time in prison
Okay.
for a crime that he didn't commit.
Yep.
You know, and he came home, made it his life mission.
Wait. Hakeem, like the dude that's on TV?
Here?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. And Jackson, right?
Yeah.
Like I've seen him on JTV and stuff.
Yes.
No shit. Okay, that's cool. That's hella cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Actually, his brother, one of his brothers, is my best friend. So.
Okay. Cool.
Because I was close with his brother, over the years, he kind of just took an interest into me. I don't know, saw something, you know, and he started reaching down.
That's cool.
You know, and while I was in prison, he answered the phone.
Mm-hmm.
When I got out of prison, you know, I would hang out with these guys, him and Anthony Giddens.
Okay.
And, you know, these two guys that I knew, they were street guys. Mm-hmm. But when I came home from prison, they were at the King Center running kids programs. Like Anthony had a chess program where he was teaching kids chess, and
cool.
You know, they would do back to school programs, pass out book bags and stuff.
Yeah. And
I'm like, damn, these dudes is like doing community service stuff, but they still like cool hood dudes. Like, you know, we still chill. Like, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like, dang, so maybe I could do that. So I started hanging around with them more, you know. And Hakeem would give me opportunities because he would know that, you know, I'm going to work 40 hours a week and bringing home $250 for 2 weeks. You know, he's watching me be subjected to that system. So he would always try to find me different money opportunities. He put me on the game with hustling oils and incense and stuff like that. And I started doing that, man. He just took a liking to me, man. Just kept me close, man. And in 2019, the opportunity came to work at Reed Manor. They had a grant that came with the community block grant. Henry Ford did this big, wrote this big grant to create these community living room spaces. They said that if we create these, you know, places for people to hang out, congregate, this will save us the money with the city because there's a lot of ambulance calls that are not really important, which waste resources. And they were finding there was a lot of elderly people doing that down at Reed Manor. You know, my cat's in the tree, call an ambulance. Yeah. My smoke detector's going off, call an ambulance. You know, I'm lonely, call an ambulance. Yeah. So they're like, well, we could fix this by creating a space, giving them something to do, engaging them with resources, different things like that. So they hired me as a resource specialist. Actually, I volunteered first.
That's cool.
I volunteered first because I had to get in. I volunteered first, then they hired me as a resource specialist, and that's how I got my foot in the door.
Okay.
You know, because having 4 felonies, you know, you need somebody to actually bring you in.
You do. I can get that.
And Hakeem, being that he was a guy that was never supposed to get out of prison, still has this felony for the rest of his life, even though he didn't commit this crime. He worked there first. And because he worked there and he was successful, they weren't afraid to give me that opportunity. Right. And that's how I got in. And I was just able to keep growing and keep getting promoted and learn more skills.
Yeah.
You know, they learn like we're the best case managers, actually.
Dude, it's funny. I always try to. I'll say it 100 times. I'm mansplaining, so they'll get over it. Or they won't. I didn't know any of this. Clearly, I didn't know this about you. But I really have loved this fucking podcast. I love this. Really, and I will try to relate, man. So. The second is our anniversary.
Get it right. It's 2, 3, 4. Dude, it's funny because a guy before me was a felon, scumbag by all means. Phil took a shot on him, made him a painter. Yeah. He did good enough. Phil took a shot on me, made me a painter, man. Yeah. So it's like it's. Yeah. Sometimes you need somebody to literally pull you in the door. Because we say that we don't where we're not prejudiced and things like that.
Mhm.
But we are as people. We just
Yeah.
have to be, because it's actually like it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because we come from traditionally, right? We used to live in the field, both of us, right? Traditionally, our ancestors. We had to live in environments where we had to protect our village.
Mhm.
If you didn't protect your family, you couldn't be no chump.
Yeah.
You right?
Yeah.
Because if you lost this battle, your family was gone.
Yeah.
Right? So you had to be the man.
Cut and dry.
Yeah, it was the man. You had to, if you didn't go out there and find us something to eat, we didn't eat.
Yeah.
So
Which are-
it's with that type of level of seriousness, our brains have to take shortcuts.
Yeah.
Because we have to quickly be able to identify danger.
Yeah.
So if historically speaking, you're trained to believe something, it's just going to be second nature.
Yeah.
You're not going to think about it. It's just like a boxer's reaction.
Yeah.
If I've trained this jab 100 times, it's going to always snap out the same way,
Yeah.
no matter what. When it's time,
Yeah.
I need to be able to use this. And a lot of prejudices are the same way,
Mhm.
right? If a mama bear knows, like, these humans feed me, she's going to be nice to these humans and it's going to come back. She's going to teach her children
You can go to
the same thing.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And vice versa. It's like the deer. The deer knows now when they see the man with the orange vest, get the hell out the way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, the deer racist. Hell, the deer like, yo, I know what happens when this man come around.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
traditionally, we as people, we have been conditioned to that, right? So we take shortcuts.
Yeah.
Take shortcuts.
Yeah.
But that don't mean the shortcut is right.
Yeah.
You know, we don't take that time to explore more.
Yep.
Right? That's what we need to get to, is taking that time to explore more. Find out a little bit more, man.
Yep.
And when we do that, you start to find out, like, damn, I'm glad I took a chance on my guy. He works hard as shit.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, nobody's gonna work harder than a felon.
No, because we got something for we need.
We
We fucking need this. Yeah.
Right? We
Yeah.
know we can't just quit this job.
Yeah. Because it'll be another 6 months, a year until I find something else.
Yeah.
And it might not even be just as good. It might
Yeah.
be worse. It might be
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yes, and even though Community Action Agency gave me this opportunity,
Mhm.
if it wasn't for Hakeem,
Yeah.
would they have pulled me in? You know what I'm saying?
It-
Would I ever been here? Would I got to this point? You know, if he didn't pull me in,
like butterfly effect there, man.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
you see what I'm saying? And now look where you're at now. You know what I mean?
So we got about I'll say 10 minutes left, but no rush. So it's your episode, your show,
No
it's
worries.
you. But so 2019, you're on the Reed Manor. If we could spend the next 10 minutes what you're doing now, you can kind of good. So you started there's a couple questions I have. So you started a hand poured candle thing.
Yeah.
What's that hand poured candle?
It's just a natural candle,
Okay.
a soy candle. I started that. That was my wife's vision,
Okay.
right?
I can't.
During the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
I was working as a case manager at Chalet Terrace in the Shahan. I had just started as basically doing homeless retention. So I was keeping people in their housing. So if you got an eviction letter, instead of you going to court, they would send them to me first. And then I was able to save their housing. So I would go and argue on their behalf. Like, look, I'm going to save my guy. I know he's spending all of his money on dope. I know he told me, but this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put him in rehab. He's going to go there for 45 days. I need y'all to hold his spot. But while y'all hold his spot, I'm going to make sure he's good and he's going to come back straight.
Mhm.
And they would let me make those type of deals,
That's nice.
you know, and I was able to save people's housing.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah, that sounds
Favorite job.
Dude, hell
You
yeah.
know, a lot of trauma associated with it, but it was fun.
Mhm.
The whole pandemic thing happened and it shut the world down.
Yeah.
Right now, all of a sudden, nobody's getting kicked out of their housing. Nobody can get kicked out of their housing. So I was literally paid to do nothing.
Okay.
Free money, sit at home.
Yeah.
Don't even come to work. World shut down. So now I'm bored. I have nothing to do. My wife, she's complaining. She wants to start this candle thing.
Okay.
My wife's not a crafty person. I'm like, where is this coming from? Whatever.
Mhm.
So I buy her a kit, like, just here.
Yeah.
You know, didn't work out, failed miserably.
Okay.
Right. One day I'm in the morning and, you know, I hear the man's voice, the
Yeah.
big man upstairs. He's like, you didn't support your wife, dude. Like, what's wrong with you? That ain't what I taught you to do. It like it only failed because you didn't show no interest. So next thing I know, there's no sports center to watch. So now I have nothing to watch on TV while I'm sitting at home all day. And just magically, all of a sudden, these candle videos start popping up on my timeline. How to make candles. And then that's how I got into it.
Awesome, man.
So we started that during the pandemic.
Cool, man. I don't want to say the wrong word, but you started a TV show, TV something?
Jackson's Straight Up Media.
Yeah.
Straight Up Media.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I did Straight Up Media. I've done so many things, man. I've done Straight Up Media. We're actually selling satellite TV.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I met a scam artist from Hillsdale. He remembers his name. We had the same name, Justin, but it was spelled different. But he was a scammer. But I worked with him when I first came home from prison because not many people would give me an opportunity.
Mhm.
I worked with him, started off in sales, and I worked my way all the way up to his office manager. And that's how I met Dina Morgan. Have you heard her name yet?
No.
Dina Morgan. She runs an organization called Dungy Tree.
Okay.
She's another.
Real quick, I don't mean to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys live on 4th Street?
We used to, yeah.
Oh my God. I bought a candle from you guys. I jumped out of a car and I was drunk. And
that's funny.
yeah, Kay said, bro, I think it was the candle you jumped out of the car for me. We bought it on 4th Street. That's wild. That's what sorry. Small world. Small world. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's funny. I'm gonna tell my wife that she's gonna love that.
Yeah, dude. And that was a week after we met, man. And I was just had a reels for her, you know.
Man.
Yeah, I climbed because I couldn't get the car open. So I climbed out the fucking window. And
I remember that.
no, I got a green candle. I think with a little pink like butterfly thing on it. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, that's funny. That's our first candles. That's what kind of like inspired us to want to keep going because we didn't know that this was gonna work, and all of a sudden, like first people told us like it's so hard to make a successful candle, and they were right. Yeah. But for some reason, God gave me this gift, right? I can do some figures, advanced math, mathematics, formulas. I understand formulas. Mm-hmm. Where I couldn't do this math as a kid, but now all of a sudden as a grown man, formulas all of a sudden make sense. And I'm like, oh, this is chemistry. You know what I'm saying? And we made a candle and it was successful. And then people said like, oh, it takes a long time before you profit. And we sat in our yard the first weekend and made almost $900. We couldn't believe it. Out of just stuff we had at Dollar Tree. And so it was like those first sales really inspired us to like, oh, this can be something.
Yeah, keep going.
And that's what it started. And we made it legit.
Oh, yeah.
It's just one of the many businesses I've done.
Awesome. Well, sorry to interrupt. Dina Morgan.
Dina Morgan.
Oh,
yeah. She's related to Tony Dungy. So she comes from that heritage.
Okay.
So look up that organization. It's called Dungy Tree.
Dungy Tree. I will.
Good people.
Okay.
But I met her working at the satellite guy for the scammer. Yeah, he was a scammer, but he taught me a lot about opening businesses and starting businesses and what not to do.
Yeah.
So that was my start. But
awesome.
Yeah, we've had a long journey, man. It's just always though, we're just always trying to progress.
Mm-hmm.
And our whole thing is, somebody had to pull me up, right? So if I don't reach down and pull others up, then that's just selfish. You're not doing what our mentors teach us, right? Working in this nonprofit world, now that I've been in this world for so long now, these last few years, I see how they operate. They literally go after grants from the government, from places like that, and they create programming to help people, right? So I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. And that's why I started Jackson Strength Network.
Awesome.
Because I want to create programs that have real value that help people do what I did, right? Yep. I had to learn how to become a hustler. I had to teach myself financial literacy. Yeah. Had to teach myself parenting skills to learn how to be a father. Mm-hmm. Had to teach myself how to be a husband. All these things I had to learn on my own, right? Without any help. And you see all these young men out here, we so quick to judge them like, man, why they ain't doing this? Why they ain't doing that? Well, you can't do something that you don't see, that you don't know. You know, if you've never had a father figure that go to work every day, you don't know what that looks like. You just know what your mom did, right?
Yeah, I was lucky. My mom and dad were older, so I was raised more like people your age. Like I was raised like my mom's 70, so it's like I was it's been weird for me because like kids my age, but they don't have it.
Yeah.
They don't, but you just put something into perspective for me. They also didn't have it.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
You know, we were real outside kids, man. You know, we had to be resilient, right? And that's why I was able to function so well on my own for so long, because we had to be resilient. You know, we had to go outside and we played all day until street lights came on.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't go in the house and be like, "I'm hungry, mama." Like, sit your ass in here then.
Yeah.
You know, you're done.
Yeah, you're done.
You know, you're like, forget that. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'll come home later.
Yeah.
So we weren't those type of kids, you know. I see a lot of moms today, right? You know, I have 3 children that live outside the home. So I have 3 different children, 3 different baby mothers. So I see like what happens. A lot of time mothers, you know, they want to protect the babies. You know, somebody messing with your baby at school, the mamas is like mama bear mode. They coming.
Yeah.
You know, they come. What you doing messing with my baby? Yeah. You know, but fathers, we don't do that. You know, we be like, look, boy, you gotta go figure it out. Yeah. You know, so a father helps you work through those things that you don't normally work through. And it helps you get to see certain things. Like, you know, I learned to fight at an early age because, you know, you had a man above you that tells you like, you're not going to die if you get punched in the face. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the end of the world. No. You know, even if you lose this fight, it's not the end of the world. It used to be like you could fight, and even if you got totally beat up in front of everybody, if you stood your ground, people would be like, man, you wasn't scared.
My dad always said your pride is going to hurt more than your face.
Yeah.
So it's like, but either way, I mean, he was right. My pride always hurt worse than my face did. So
now you look at these guys that don't grow up with those type of lessons now, right? When they're getting in these conflicts, they're not fighting. They're turning to shooting. Yeah. And it's because they were never taught to handle their emotions in this way. Yeah. You know, we were taught to fight and then shake hands afterwards. Yeah. So I'd fight you and then good man, you got me that time, or I got you this time. You know,
going to burger or something. Yeah. I mean, sometimes friends fight, and it's like, now we're gonna go do whatever.
Yeah, one of my best friends we met because of a fight. Yeah, you know, we fought first, and then we became friends. But in today's society, one of us would have killed each other, and we would have never had that chance to be friends. Yep.
And not hate each other
forever. You know,
it's crazy.
It's crazy. But a lot of it just stems from not having these figures around, people around to be role models, and you know, those are the things we're trying to change.
Well, so just a couple things before we log off. We're at about an hour and a half. Perfect. Thank you. I knew this was going to be a good one. I'm trying to go for longer episodes, but you know, I don't want to overkill episodes either. You know, like there's a nice, there's a good line until you're like, okay, shut the hell up, guys. So talking more about me, you know, your story's been awesome. But what are you doing now specifically, and what are you doing this Saturday?
So this Saturday we got it's our first event from our group, Jackson Strength Network. I created a group, support group for men. I said we need a space that we can be men. We can understand what's toxic, what's not toxic, what's masculinity, really. Yeah. You know, mental health. Let's talk about mental health. We don't get to talk about these things, relationship things, things your mother can't teach you, things your girlfriend can't teach you. You know, we don't need to be dumping all of this stuff on your girlfriend. You know, come talk to us guys. Yeah. So we created this space for men, and we said we want to have an event to show men that we support them. Yeah. So let's do a father appreciation event, and that's what we're doing. So this Saturday, you guys got to come out from 12 to 6. We're going to be on the corner of MLK and Franklin, right outside. We chose this location because it was centrally located, so even dads without vehicles can get there. They can get there on the bus. They can walk there. You know, we want you to bring your kids. This is what the idea is. Dads, spend the day with your family, with your kids. So even if you don't live in the home with your kid, you know, you can have your baby mama come too. Bring the kids. We got free food from the Beacon Church. It's a beautiful church. Pastor Wendy, I love her to death. They're doing the food. We've got a gaming truck coming. So we got the mobile gaming truck for the kids. I got N&N mascots is coming with a couple mascots. So let's pray this rain away so our mascots can stay out there. And I've got resources tailored specifically for men, right? Because I thought about that as well. You know, we want to be able to support fathers in every way, you know, and that means even the fathers that need to be better fathers, that want to be better fathers. They need these support, these resources. Let's have that too, right? And then let's figure out a way to give dads something. You know, I mean, how many fathers actually get like something on Father's Day? Like, you know, and if you do, it's a tie.
A handwritten card.
Handwritten. And you know, we love that.
Yeah.
We as men, you know, we a lot of times make the sacrifices, right? For our families. All the time we make the sacrifices. And we do it because we know this is what we do, right? We don't want nothing in return, none of that. You know, so we don't care about the gifts. You know, we're happy with that drawing. It's the best thing in the world.
You go down forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
And at the same time, you know, it does feel good getting something. So we said, let's do that for people. We went around the community. I went around to a lot of businesses like Hammond Hardware. Hammond Hardware gave me a nice basket full of tools, you know, rotary saw, like all kind of stuff that guys want, guys need.
They're good people.
Good people.
Good people.
Yeah. And almost every place that we went to, they were just, when they heard what we were trying to do, I said, man, I want to give dads prizes.
Yeah.
I want you to bring a deserving dad, man, or a father figure. I don't care if it was your uncle, but he was your father figure.
Yeah.
Bring him down. I want him to win something and win something nice. So we've got drills. You know, we've got best dad cups and shirts and socks and all types of fun stuff, you know, tailored to dads. I even have a free 2-hour studio session for a dad that raps. So bring a dad that raps down. Maybe he can win the studio session. You know, we're just trying to do something to show these fathers, like, look, we appreciate you, man, for making these sacrifices. And we want to change this perception that people have.
Awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
We want to change that because it is the perception, it's not the truth. So we want to get them to understand, like, look, you see all these fathers out here.
Yeah.
And right now, I go and I do a lot of reading in the Head Start classes with the kids. And you can see kids of all color, right? Don't have fathers in the home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see it so fast as a man because they cling to you. They don't want you to leave. It's the saddest thing. You know, to have a little white kid on your lap, like, you know, and it's because he never had a meal and to show attention, you know, just to take this second and read to him, you know, like he's my son. And they don't want you to leave. And you understand, it's like, man, this kid don't have a dad around, you know. It breaks your heart. But you know that this is not the reality because there's a lot of men that are there, but they're going through all of these barriers now. You got the systems on them. You got all of this stuff, and now you even got the women have changed now, and sometimes they're like against them. Like, man, he ain't doing nothing. You don't deserve to see this kid. You know. So now it becomes what can you do for me?
Yeah.
Right. When we understand that it's more than money, man. It's more than money. Now, I came home from prison, you know, with child support taking 55% of my income. It's still that way for me now. Even now, I gross $1,700. I bring $600 home every 2 weeks. Still, so that I still make that $1,200 a month that I made in the military. That's my karma from God. You know, I still make that wasn't enough. You know, but God has humbled me to the point where now that I'm satisfied with this, well, I'm not satisfied, but I'm not committing crimes to supplement. You know what I mean? I supplement it other ways with legal businesses. That's why I do so much. That's why I have the candle business, the retail business, this, that, because I have to supplement. So I show young men, like, look, life don't have to be this hard for you, right? We can show you how to do this. Let me show you how to do it this way. So you don't have to do everything that I did. And you don't have to work as hard as I have to, right? Because it don't have to be this way.
So go through it the hard way.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. You don't have to.
But we have to advocate.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so open. I tell my story. You know, I don't tell it for you to say boo hoo, you know.
Mhm.
No. It ain't no boo hoo because I'm a man. I work for this, you know.
You hold yourself very well.
Yeah, you know, because we know we understand. I watch men die in prison. Right? When you watch men die in prison with no comfort care, right? There's nothing. You get no family, nobody to ease your pain. You know what I'm saying? You just die. You know, you don't get nothing but a Tylenol, Motrin. That's it. So you're dying of like serious stuff and you're in pain, screaming all day during the death process. And it's like, do I want to go like that? You know, is it worth it? Everything that I was doing, was that really worth it? No. There's other ways to do this.
Yeah.
So let's show people.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on. I got one wrap-up question, well, two, but what's your definition of success?
Oh, my definition of success is that you're happy and that you're living life the right way with integrity. It's not monetary, man. It's raising your kids, taking care of your family. That's success.
Katie always asks the question, and she would kill me if I don't, because we've asked every person. If you could sum up your story in one word from where you started to where you are now, what would it be?
Redemption.
Redemption. Right on. Right on, man. So before you go, hey, I'll ask you to sign the table after we go offline. I get a gift card every week. I kind of ran out of time this week, but I thought, okay, you're doing something. You can either give it away or you can get something for what you're doing. $20 gift card from Walmart. So, you know, I try to do local, but I was like, well, what you got going on? Maybe you can give it away or maybe, or whatever. So,
and I like that. Dream big.
Yeah.
Dream big.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna end this live, but thank you, man, really for coming on. This was
That's no problem.
dude,
man.
I appreciate
Anytime,
it.
man.